Hey everyone, it's Bobby Sylvester. We've got a sleeper episode for you in a moment, but first, a word from one of today's sponsors. It's go time for fantasy football. Take things to the next level this year with Flea Flicker, the platform that serious commissioners and beginners rave about. Commissioners love Flea Flicker for offering tons of flexibility and customization. League sizes range from 4 to 24, so it's perfect for inviting friends and family, and features like email drafts make time management a breeze. League members love Flea Flicker's lightning-fast live scoring, easy-to-use interface, and new mobile app. They've partnered with the top names in the industry, including fantasy pros, to provide reliable rankings, projections, and player notes. Best of all, it's 100% free. Pick Flea Flicker for a better fantasy experience that's fun and easy, fast, and free. Visit fleaflicker.com/pros today. That's FLEA flicker.com/pros. All right, let's talk some football. Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester with Mike Tagliere as always. Tags, Tyrod stock is down, Zay Jones stock is up. All is right in our world, buddy.
Everything's changing, man. You know, I've had a lot of people talking to me this morning, last night, this weekend about the Tyrod situation. I'm sure we're going to talk about that today and kind of like everything that revolves around that, because there are so many things that have kind of fallen out because of Anquan Boldin retiring. And I can't wait to talk about this stuff with our guest today, Bobby.
Absolutely. Our guest today, for those of you listening at home, is basically Iron Man or Batman, whichever you want to be, Sean. You finished number one in our accuracy ranking so many times. It's like Tiger Woods dominance. I would bet on him against the field over 140 other fantasy experts. Is that enough pressure, Sean? Which superhero do you want to be?
Yeah, I like Batman. Let's go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a lot of pressure, but I'm definitely gonna gun at that three-peat. That's definitely my mission this year.
No, it's something amazing, man. It's crazy to see your accuracy year over year over year, and that's why we picked you for the perfect episode this week, right, Bobby?
Yeah, this is the episode. Everyone loves the sleepers episode, and we're really looking forward to picking your brain, hearing what you have to say about some potential sleepers. But first, we have some news from the weekend. As I alluded to earlier, Anquan Boldin retired, but I don't think that really changes much fantasy-wise, besides maybe Zay Jones a round or two earlier and Tyrod a little later. I mean, he looked pathetic anyway, so I don't think you really want to draft him right now. But what I want to talk about is Le'Veon Bell missing another preseason game. Sean, apparently he's coming back for the next game, but do you think fantasy owners should be concerned enough to take DJ number 1 and maybe even Antonio Brown number 2?
I wouldn't go as far as taking Antonio Brown number 2 yet, but I've always been a believer that this year just take David Johnson first overall. I'm not even debating that, and it has nothing to do with the situation brewing with Le'Veon Bell. I just think, David Johnson, he carries less risk. He's just a typical ideal number 1 overall pick for me, so I'm not even debating that. But I think you still want to take Le'Veon Bell second overall, especially with Zeke out 6 games. I think that just that boosted Le'Veon Bell's stock even more, in my opinion. So I'm a hold for now on Bell.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've had Bell number 1, and I understand going back and forth between Bell and DJ. It's it's a very I don't think you can make a wrong pick, but at the same time, with this like holdout here, with a veteran like Bell, I'm not too concerned about it. He's already said that he'll return soon to the team. He's not leaving the team. He's not holding out or anything like that. It's just a matter of time, and he's just missing out the grunt work, right? And I don't think it's a bad thing having your running back come into the season fresh as can be. So, I do want to go back to this Bills situation, though, and Sean, get your take on this. Anquan Boldin, he retired, right? And so this is a guy that I talked about on the show last week, saying that he couldn't have been happy with what the Bills were doing around him. This is a guy that was sitting out there waiting for the right opportunity, signed with the Bills. I don't know if he felt like they could win a championship, but I think it's clear that this team is in full rebuild mode. What does this do for Tyrod Taylor going forward? Is he was someone that I loved late in drafts, but now I'm pretty much staying away from him unless we hear that he's traded to someone like maybe the Broncos, maybe the Jaguars. What's your take on Tyrod Taylor if he does remain in Buffalo?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to Boldin, I still think Tyrod's stock is about the same. He might fall in drafts now, and spoiler alert, I might mention Tyrod Taylor in our sleeper section. He gets a lot of his value with his legs. So, him going from 100 and 98 passing yards a game to 190 doesn't really impact his outlook for me.
That's a great point.
He's all about his legs, so they might have to rely on him even more. From a offensive standpoint, I think it's pretty brutal that they traded away Sammy Watkins. They brought in Jordan Matthews, and then they had this veteran and Bolden to kind of help, keep the passing attack in check. So Bolden leaving makes me think they're going to have to add some sort of wide receiver because they just don't have the depth to just say, all right, well, we're down a receiver. I think they're going to have to add somebody, and there's enough time to get somebody acclimated with the offense before the season starts. So I'm not really downgrading Tyrod too much right now, but we can dive into that deeper a bit later.
It's not like Anquan Bolden was going to be drafted in fantasy drafts anyway. I mean, how much of an impact does he have? He helps the run game quite a bit. He's a pretty good red zone receiver, but that just means the red zone targets are going to go elsewhere, and maybe they miss out on a touchdown or two. Like Sean said, he said 8 yards per game. I think it might even be less than that. So, Tyrod Taylor might drop from 198 to whatever it was Sean said, maybe 190. I think it's probably a little bit less than that, but I don't think Anquan Bolden changes it that much. What I do want to mention, however, is what I said a few episodes ago. David Johnson passed that magical 360 touches number that historically crushes running backs the following year. And one stat I haven't mentioned is after week 6, he rushed for just 3.67 yards per carry. I'm definitely taking Le'Veon Bell number 1 overall if I have the shot, just because David Johnson, I know he's got the volume going for him. I know he's going to get the goal line touches, but Le'Veon Bell was on pace for 2,500 all-purpose yards last year. Yards from scrimmage last year. So he's my number 1 guy, but it's really close. You can't go wrong with either one, right, Tags?
Yeah, I think the part of the issue with David Johnson down the stretch was the offensive line lost a couple players on it. On top of that, John Brown wasn't playing all the snaps. Michael Floyd wasn't there for part of that. So, everything turned into David Johnson, right? And it was out of necessity. Did he make the most of his opportunity? He absolutely did. And Bruce Arians has stood by the fact that he's saying, we'll give David Johnson the ball 30 times per game. If John Brown can't get healthy and can't get on the field, it's a problem, right? You're going to have tons of teams just keying in on David Johnson. So I think it's essential to David Johnson's upside that John Brown gets in the field. I don't think David Johnson can sustain his production that he had last year in the receiving game without some real, field stretching guy on the field, because J.J. Nelson's not going to get it done. But One, I really want to take time to talk about this for a second here, guys. And Sean, I'm really curious to get your take on this. We've talked about Spencer Ware and Kareem Hunt on this show before.
Yes.
Spencer Ware looked phenomenal. He looked phenomenal in week 1 of the preseason. Everybody's like, oh, it's Spencer Ware's job. And just like everything else, right? People they want to love the player that gets it done that week. The Chiefs came out and said, we wanted to see how Kareem Hunt would do with the first team offense, and he looked pretty good. The funny thing about this, though, and I don't want to go on too much of a rant here, but at the same time, I feel the need to say everybody is going over the top on Kareem Hunt here. He averaged 5.7 yards per touch. Okay, it was a solid performance. I'm not going to take that away from him. But Spencer Ware, over the last 2 years of regular season football, not preseason, regular season, has averaged 5.7 yards per touch. Why are we getting so excited about Kareem Hunt here? Do you think this was just more like we wanted to get the rookie some reps with the ones? Spencer Ware is fine. I'm not worried so much because Spencer Ware, he didn't come back in the game. So it was almost like they're preserving their starter. They just wanted to get the rookie some reps.
1 touch, 3 yards, and then they took him out. He's the clear starter, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's how I'm viewing it. And, I snagged him in our Dynasty League, so I have to be kind of biased towards him. But I do think Kareem Hunt poses the threat of a running back by committee at some point this season. So, I'm just a little soured on Ware's outlook. But I feel like Ware, he's kind of like in the sweet spot in the draft where I'm usually selecting my RB2 or RB3. And, if you look at the guys around him, he's almost the safest play amongst some of the guys he's being selected around. But yeah, long term, I think Kareem Hunt has the skill set to really push for carries. So, right now I'm a hold on each guy, but I am definitely not overreaching for Hunt whatsoever. I think it's getting kind of blown out of proportion. He's great for Dynasty, but for this season, I think it's going to take a Ware injury for him to be truly relevant, in my opinion.
Well, that's the thing with me, right? I wrote up this Spencer Ware player profile, and over the last 4 years, I wanted to keep it somewhat recent, but over the last 4 years with Andy Reid, there have been 64 games possible, right? 16 times 4, 64 games. All right, so if we look at this, 51 games, 51 of those 64 games, there was a running back who totaled at least 16 touches, whether it be Jamal Charles, Spencer Ware, Charkandrick West, or Niall Davis, okay? So when you look at that, Andy Reid wants a workhorse. And I'm not going to completely say that the rookie's not an issue. Kareem Hunt is not an issue to my little projection on Spencer Ware, because if he wasn't an issue to me, Spencer Ware would be a top 12 running back. Okay, so I made the case that I feel like you can draft Spencer Ware and Kareem Hunt with like a 5th or 6th round pick on Ware, and then like a 9th or 10th round pick on Hunt, and you have a guaranteed RB1 for the remainder of the season. And I still stand by that. I think that Spencer Ware is the starter. Is the risk baked into his price? It absolutely is. But Kareem Hunt getting those carries, he looked solid. But again, I just want to make sure that our listeners out there are not going overboard, because there's been kind of like an overreaction in terms of this whole Kareem Hunt thing.
Before we move on to sleepers, I want to remind you all about our contest going on right now. We just gave away the signed Melvin Gordon jersey from Pristine Auction, and now we're going to give away another one this time. Listen to this, guys. Odell Beckham Jr. jersey. To enter, just take a screenshot of your review and subscription on iTunes, then send it into contest@fantasypros.com. Your review gets you an entry into every contest for the rest of the year, so make sure to get them in quickly. We're going to run this contest for 2 weeks. Odell Beckham signed jersey from pristineauction.com. Okay, sleeper time. We're going to go on roundtable fashion again here, where we take turns giving sleeper takes. Tags, you're first. Who do you have for us?
So let's start at quarterback. We've been starting at running back recently, so I want to start right at the top at quarterback. And, this would have been Tyrod Taylor just 2 weeks ago, but things have changed a lot. So I'm going to actually go with Andy Dalton here. A lot of people have asked me, Mike, if I don't take Aaron Rodgers, do I go with someone like Jameis Winston in the 7th or 8th round? No. My argument here is that if you miss out on Aaron Rodgers at, the end of 3rd, beginning of the 4th round, Brady, that 5th round area, Breeze in the 6th, you're probably going to wait at quarterback, right? I don't want you taking someone in the middle there, because those are the guys that are lumped in. There are guys that it wouldn't shock me if all of them finished within, maybe 2 points a game within each other. And I think one of those guys that could fit in that group who you're able to get for free is Andy Dalton. He's going as the 18th quarterback off the board right now. He has, going back over the last 5 years, nobody realizes that this is a guy who at the end of the season has finished as a QB1 in 3 of those 5 seasons. Now,
top 5 ones too.
Actually, that's the thing, is if you were to actually look at the one season that he got hurt, he was the number 9 quarterback in points per game. So he's essentially been a QB1 in 4 of the last 5 seasons. He has never finished outside the top 18 quarterbacks. He has the best talent throwing to this year. He's got a healthy Tyler Eifert. He has a healthy AJ Green. He has a field stretcher in John Ross. He has a pass catching running back in Joe Mixon. He has Gio Bernard healthy. It's just the offensive line is a concern, of course, and I'm not going to overlook that, because he did lose his right guard and his left tackle. But at the same time, that is more than built into his price. This is a team that the defense is trending down just a little bit. He's going to throw maybe 600 times this year. I love Andy Dalton. And Sean, am I wrong on this one?
No, he was actually my second sleeper pick. So just to piggyback on that, I agree with you. And I think his stock has kind of unfairly gone down the past year, because he hasn't played with a healthy AJ Green or Eifert for a while now, so he gets both of them back this year. As you mentioned, they added Mixon, who's a pass catching running back, and John Ross for more depth. I just love him this year, and he's a great backup for if you want to take Andrew Luck and risk Andrew Luck might miss the first couple of games. You can have a solid backup quarterback like Dalton, where you won't be afraid to throw him out there for the first couple of weeks. And it can kind of cap your downside with a risky pick like Luck this year. So I just think he's a great, reliable QB2. Or if you really want to wait on quarterback, he can be a decent QB1 if you want to load up at other positions.
For sure. Bobby, I know you're high on Dalton too, right?
You actually took my pick. I don't have anything to say anymore, because this is what it comes down to. I'm either getting Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round, or I'm waiting and I'm reaching 2 rounds for Andy Dalton, because it's not reaching for Andy Dalton. Even if you reach 2 rounds for Andy Dalton, you're taking him 3-4 rounds after he should actually go. It's an incredible value, guys. If Aaron Rodgers is not your QB1, the value is with Andy Dalton, and I'm willing to reach on him.
All right, so Sean, I know it seems I took your second one. Who is your number 1 sleeper at the quarterback position?
So, the guy we already talked about, but I would say Tyrod Taylor, especially with this news, I think provides some sneaky value. Now, when it comes to Tyrod, I'm not recommending him as your QB1. I don't want to rely on him week to week, but I think he provides a good floor ceiling combo as your backup QB. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't really rely on his passing stats. So, if Anquan Bolden's gone and he's still, throwing for 180 yards and a touchdown or 2 a week, that really doesn't impact my view on him. His value in standard format is, with the rushing stats. You can usually bank on 40 rushing yards and, a touchdown every other week. So I think, it gives him a good solid floor. He's not going to put up many duds. Just last year, he was a top 5 QB 4 times, and he was only outside of the top 15 3 times. And that kind of just illustrates, he's usually finishing, between the top 5 to top 12 QB. So he's putting up low end QB1 numbers every week, and he does it in a sneaky way with his rushing stats that I usually say go overlooked when it comes to fantasy football. Is those rushing stats really add up. So, with the Anquan Bolden news, I think it's only going to help his ADP drop a bit. So I'll just be taking him a bit later if I wait to get my backup quarterback.
You're exactly right. Tags and I both love Tyrod Taylor. I mean, it was a bit sloppy last week. He was actually worse than Blake Bortles. If you look at the pure numbers, he was really bad, but that's going to make his ADP drop, like you said. And top 7, top 8 quarterback each of the past 2 seasons. I know Sammy Watkins is gone, but this boy can play some football. He basically gets a free passing touchdown every single week just with his legs.
But hold on a second. I really want to discuss this because we've talked about Tyrod Taylor a lot, and he's a guy that I was pimping out to the audience, and I wanted everybody to draft him. But I want to be real here and say that we don't know that Tyrod Taylor is going to start every game for them. The Bills are in rebuild mode. Nathan Peterman has looked somewhat solid for a guy that I don't think we expected too much out of. I didn't think that he would ever get to start the season if they were actually contending. So that's a concern. On top of that, what if LaShawn McCoy gets traded? Like how many pieces can we take away from Tyrod and still look at him as a top end quarterback? I had him at number 7 in my quarterback rankings. I was higher than anybody on Tyrod. And yes, there's been 10 games in his over the last 2 years where he played without Sammy. In those games, he only scored 1.2 less fantasy points per game. So the production was still solid from him. He was getting those rushing yards, but I can't pretend that you keep on taking things away and you keep taking things away. And Cordy Glenn, his left tackle, one of the most important positions out there for him, he's got a leg injury and apparently he's going to try and play through. But aren't there so many red flags here that we have to move him down our draft board?
Yeah, I think those are great points. And, with running quarterbacks, they're a little bit more prone to in-season injury. So I do project them for a little bit less games played than your average, pocket passer. But those are all huge downs. If he gets benched, that's a huge downside. But that's why I'm drafting him as my QB too. And, I'm not relying on him. And if something happens where he gets benched or traded to be a backup on another team or injured, then you're just going to have to get a Joe Flacco or Alex Smith off the waiver wire. And that's, a little bit of a drop off, but not a huge deal in my opinion. So I'm just drafting him as a backup quarterback so that when he is healthy, when he is starting, he provides some stability and, the upside to really fill in on a bye week. That's the only reason I'm drafting him, but you do bring up some valid points.
Now, so just as a question, I'll ask both of you guys, who would you take as of right now, Tyrod Taylor or Andy Dalton?
Andy Dalton.
Yeah, Andy Dalton.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to make sure, so that we're getting our point across here. Now, Bobby, it seems like we stole some of your quarterbacks. Is there anybody else you wanted to bring on, or do you want to start us off with running backs?
No, I really don't want to give bad advice. Like, if you're getting a sleeper, those are the 2 guys, Andy Dalton, Tyrod Taylor. I'm not going to add on to any of that. Everything you guys said was perfect. I'm going to go to running back next, but before I give my first sleeper, I want to talk about these best ball leagues that PlayDraft.com has been putting on. If you haven't done a best ball league before, there is no in-season roster management, no trades, no waiver wire, no lineup setting. All you have to do is draft. And it takes your best possible lineup each week. This makes it so you can do like 50 plus leagues like Tags and I have done and not lose any time during the season. These things are amazing, and PlayDraft does it better than anybody else. I've been having a blast with their best ball leagues. Tags and I are actually going to be drafting against listeners every few days, so make sure to follow us on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL so you know when we're starting one. We've also got a promo code for you if you visit playdraft.com/fantasypros. Sign up and make your first deposit, and you'll be entered into the best ball draft for free. That's playdraft.com/fantasypros. Okay, so let's talk running backs now. I think Derrick Henry's the obvious one. I think every single person knows Derrick Henry. I'm not really going to expound on that much. DeMarco Murray took a big step backwards at the end of the season. Derrick Henry was dominating. I don't think he's going to take the job, but he has significant potential, top 5 running back potential. Jamal Williams is the one that stands out to me. For what it's worth, my last 2 picks, James Conner and Jonathan Williams in place of a kicker in defense, I take them in virtually every draft, and now I'm eyeing Corey Clement. But Jamal Williams, this is what it comes down to. Ty Montgomery is an incredible talent, but the Packers only trusted him with 10 carries once all last season. He's not very good at pass blocking yet. I know they said he worked on it, but I don't think that he's ready, and Jamal Williams has looked very good. This Packers offense continues until last year to produce top-notch fantasy running backs. I think that if Jamal Williams can take over this job, and there's a distinct possibility it happens within the first 3 weeks, he could be a top 10 running back, no doubt about it, right, Tex?
For sure. He's actually one of the guys I had on my list as well. Is just, what we look at for, there's a difference. And I want to clarify here before Sean gets into is that when you were talking about sleepers, right, these are guys that are potential league winners, right? I mean, there's guys that, we're kind of focusing on the guys taken outside the top 120 picks. We want double digit round guys. There's guys that you could grab to be fillers in your lineup, right? But these are sleepers, guys that could finish as a potential league winner. And Jamal Williams fits that category for me. I've talked about on this show is that I did this research in terms of how much team scoring matters. And if you want to finish as a top 12 fantasy running back, 64% of the time, you have to be on a top 12 scoring offense. We know that Aaron Rodgers, he's going to give you that every single week. Ty Montgomery is not a running back for as long as Jamal Williams has been. This is a guy who's walked in over half of his games last year at BYU. He carried the ball more than 20 times. He's built for a workhorse role. Ty Montgomery has a soft tissue injury, guys. We've seen this with guys like Alshon Jeffrey. We've seen this stuff carry out throughout the season. If Ty Montgomery can't get on the field and show that he's learned how to pass block, which was the biggest concern last year and why, they wouldn't give him over 10 carries seemingly in any single game, that's why. Mike McCarthy all offseason has talked about we need to see him pass blocking. He's still learning the position. If he's not out there getting the reps, he's not going to be the starting running back getting all those snaps that people think he's going to get as a 3rd or a 4th round pick. So Jamal Williams, yes. Sean, do you have any takes on Jamal Williams?
No, I love it, and it's kind of goes with the strategy that I have my other sleeper picks, but I love him for the sake of, even if Ty Montgomery is healthy all year long, you can make a case that Jamal Williams can be fantasy relevant. He has the tool set to be an every down back, and if Ty Montgomery does get hurt, which it's very possible, he's a very fragile running back, and, he has a lot of the same just week-to-week injuries that a John Brown is dealing with. So, yeah, I'm loving Jamal Williams because if Ty Montgomery goes down or misses extended time, he's going to get a ton of carries. And the other thing is, the Packers, they haven't really had a goal line back in a while. They had the John Kuhn 1-yard touchdown runs, and last year's Ripkowski. But Jamal Williams, he can provide a legit goal line back for them, and I think they need that. So, he checks all the boxes, and we're talking beyond round 10 here. You're not getting David Johnson or, Spencer Ware anymore. We're dealing with the scraps, and he has upside, past round 10, but he also can provide sneaky value week to week, even if Ty Montgomery is healthy all year. So I think that's why he's a great pick.
For sure. And Sean, I want to go to you here. I don't want to steal your pick at running back. Who are some of the running backs that you're targeting as sleepers, in those double-digit rounds?
So this, my first pick, it's less about the running back and it's more about just general strategy, but my pick would be Darren McFadden. I think we all know that he's the primary beneficiary of the Zeke massive 6-game suspension, but I think people tend to rank him just based on his raw projection. So I have him right now as the number 42 running back just based on his projections alone. But if you factor in the 6 starts that he's likely to get, I have him averaging about 10 fantasy points a game for those starts. So when you actually factor in, the concept that you're going to be able to actually start him about 4 times, most teams, I think he's being a little bit undervalued. So I have him, with that value in mind, I have him as the running back 32. So I think he's a good steal in, rounds 10 through 13, depending on how your team is constructed. But I think people overlook the concept of him, providing immediate value early on in the season. So he's a guy I'll be targeting early on, and I think he's a good pair with like a Doug Martin. You can kind of have, that first 3-week stretch where you don't have Doug Martin, you can have McFadden fill in the meantime. And then you never know, Zeke Elliott could do something stupid and get, banned the whole season. So I think there's even more upside with McFadden than we might realize. He's especially valuable for, a fantasy manager that just wants to make the playoffs. In certain leagues when, say 8 of the 12 teams make the playoffs, I don't think he's as great of a pick. But he's a guy that can kind of help you make the playoffs.
For sure. And I've been on record on this show as to saying I would take McFadden as high as I think the 8th round, especially if you grab Zeke. You may need to go to the 7th round just to ensure you get that guy. I think people are overestimating Alfred Morris. He was playing into the third quarter in the preseason. Darren McFadden has taken almost every single rep with the first team offense. He's the pass catcher. They're going to need him to do that, with the amount of tension that Des Bryant's receiving. And Jason Witten is not getting any younger. Terrence Williams is nothing special. So I definitely agree on the Darren McFadden choice. And, I think you brought up an interesting point, is that just because Darren McFadden doesn't finish as a top 40 running back in season end fantasy points, it doesn't mean he shouldn't be drafted inside the top 40 running backs, because you almost know when those scores are going to come in the first 6 weeks. And I also want to make the point is that something I kind of overlooked right when that Zeke news broke. If you are out there planning on drafting Ezekiel Elliott, and I know a lot of you have asked me is it okay to take him in the second round, beware of this. It's not just the 6 games. They have their bye week in week 7. So you are essentially without your second round pick in the first 7 weeks. That is more than half of the fantasy regular season. So it's going to put you at a serious disadvantage. So for me, you need to ensure you get Darren McFadden. That's really tough sometimes, especially, if you're at the end of the second, like say that turn. It's tough because you may have to reach, at the 4 or 5 turn, because you don't know how your league mates are going to respond to this news. But I definitely agree with you on the McFadden thing. I think it was interesting that you brought up McFadden, pairing him with Doug Martin. I think that's a phenomenal strategy.
Here's my issue with Darren McFadden. Let me preface this by saying I'm still taking Darren McFadden in the 7th round. If these issues didn't exist, I'd probably take him in the 6th. I'm not messing around with Darren McFadden, because when you think about it, it's points above replacement per week started. It's not over the full season. You're talking about each week. And over the replacement level value, we're talking about an extra 6 points every single week for 6 weeks. That's plus 36. That's an incredible value. That's someone who should be going in the top 70. My issue is Alfred Morris is still there. I think Darren McFadden's the guy, but maybe he's not. Maybe Alfred Morris is. And then Ezekiel Elliott's supposed to be out 6 weeks, but here comes the appeal. Maybe he's only out 4. Maybe he's only out 5, and that does change things a bit. So I'm taking McFadden in the 7th. You just think about it, and there's a chance that Elliott gets hurt too. You talk about the potential suspension. Starting running backs get hurt all the time, especially guys used as much as Ezekiel Elliott. There's a legitimate chance. Let's say Elliott goes down after 1 or 2 weeks. McFadden probably has more upside than any backup running back not named Derrick Henry.
It's true. It's true. There's holes in the offensive line now, right? That right side of the offensive line may not be as strong, but McFadden is still, he's still going to be a borderline RB1 every single week with Ezekiel Elliott out. So, all right. So I want to give my running back. It's Jonathan Williams. And this goes back to the LaShawn McCoy potential being traded out of Buffalo. Rumor has it that the Bills have already shopped LaShawn McCoy. I don't know if there's any truth to those rumors. That's exactly what they are. The rumors. We don't know that for a fact. But thinking about the entire team situation, LaShawn McCoy, 29 years old, the thing is, he's coming towards the end. This is a guy that would probably want to win as well. Maybe they trade him back to Philadelphia. That would actually make the most sense in the world if they're talking about getting rid of LeGarrette Blount. Darren Sproles in the final year. He's playing his last year in the NFL. They're a team that thinks they could win now. There's just a whole lot of pluses to this. So if that were to happen, or let's say LaShawn McCoy just breaks down, he's an aging running back who has seen a toll on his body. Jonathan Williams will be playing behind a Buffalo Bills offensive line who created 2.6 yards before contact last year. That's phenomenal. Some running backs don't even average 2.6 yards per carry. Todd Gurley was close. But the next closest team, 2.27 yards before contact. And that was the Atlanta Falcons. We know how that worked out, right?
Huge difference.
And that's a massive gap. It's over 10%. So, when you look at this, there's really nobody else in the roster that the Bills could hand that job to. So Jonathan Williams could potentially be a league winner. Stranger things have happened, right? And when we're looking out, this guy, he's being taken outside the top 160 picks. So essentially the last round if it's in the 16th round of your 10-team league, that's essentially free. And this is a guy that could be, again, potentially a league winner.
Well, Tag stole my guy again, so I'll just piggyback on Jonathan Williams. I think he's a great pick this spot in the draft. I want to preface this with, the first half of the draft, I like to draft with the belief that everything's going to happen that we, expect to happen at the beginning of the year. And then the second half of the draft, I like to draft just based on chaos, that, nothing ever goes as according to plan. Guys get hurt, starters lose their job. And Jonathan Williams, he's a very high upside player because of all the things you guys mentioned. If LaShawn McCoy were to ever go down or traded, he would just skyrocket to every week RB2. So I like getting guys like that this late in the draft. I think it's just a phenomenal pick, and he can actually put up some decent numbers even if McCoy is there. The Bills certainly have the offense to, have two fantasy relevant running backs. So I just think he's a great pick, and he's a workhorse back. He can handle 20 plus touches a game if the time comes, and those are the guys that you want to target this late in the draft.
They had 28 rushing touchdowns last year. I definitely think that he is a flex-worthy play in 14-team leagues. I'm not going to say 12-team leagues, and not week to week, but certain matchups, yeah, Jonathan Williams is a nice, safe play with huge upside, and I would say running back one almost every single week.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be tough to make the case against him, right, if LaShawn McCoy was gone. But let's get a couple more running backs before we move on to wide receiver. Maybe we just mention them. So the last two on my list were Deontay Foreman and DeAndre Washington. Again, two guys who would essentially walk into a workhorse role. I think Foreman more than Washington because Jalen Richard is still there, right? But it's a phenomenal offense in Oakland. He was supposed to be that guy last year. And I don't think he's done anything to basically convince coaches that he can't be that guy. He's looked solid. So those are my last two running backs on my list. Bobby, who do you have? Do you want to mention anybody before we move on to wide receiver?
I'm not digging Foreman much. I already mentioned James Conner. I'll just touch on that just a little bit. Le'Veon Bell gets hurt a lot. I mean, just because he hasn't missed a bunch of regular season games outside of the suspension doesn't mean he doesn't get hurt. He's been hurt in each of the past two playoffs that they played in. He gets so many touches that he's injury prone. Of course, he's got the suspension stuff going on, so maybe something else happens there. When the Pittsburgh Steelers have an injured running back, no matter what, their backup running back is the top dog. He gets all of the touches. We've seen it with D'Angelo Williams. And I think we'll see it with James Conner. I think he's ready. He's the perfect fit for their scheme. I just think that James Conner is ready for the prime time in this perfect offensive fit for them. And, it very well could happen that Le'Veon Bell goes down substantial upside again for free.
He had tons of work yesterday in their preseason game, and he didn't look special or anything like that. He looked very workmanlike-esque. They had him out there into the fourth quarter, which is a little concerning in his first game. But, Sean, is there anybody that you wanted to did you want to touch on any of those guys, or do you have any other guys you wanted to mention?
Yeah, Foreman was my other guy. So thanks for that again. So he's another great guy where he can handle 20 plus touches. He has the frame to do it, and he's behind one of the most fragile backups. I think Lamar Miller, there's just something about him. I don't know if he can handle the amount of work they want to give him. So he's a great handcuff. And Connor, if you take Le'Veon Bell, you have to handcuff with Connor. You just have to. So those are two great guys to kind of key in on later in the draft, depending on how you select in the first 10 rounds of the draft.
All right, Sean. So I'm not going to give anybody a chance to steal anything from you. You're starting out the wide receivers. Let's hear about some players that you want to take outside in those double-digit rounds.
Thank you. So the first one would be Tyrell Williams. I just think his draft stock for some reason is super low right now, and it might be creeping back up with the Mike Williams injury news. People might be slowly reacting to that in drafts, but I just think he's a guy that should be taken in the first 10 rounds of the draft, not after, which is where his current ADP is. So he's a guy, similar situation where I think he's going to be, a startable wide receiver right away. But, as injuries happen, and we see it almost every year for the Chargers, he's just going to become more and more valuable. So I think he's a good guy to buy low right now. And, he has the upside to be, wide receiver 2 like we saw last year. So he's a guy I'm going to target late in drafts to kind of help fill out my starting wide receivers. But, right now I just think he's a steal.
Bobby, what do you think?
I love Tyrell Williams. I love pretty much everyone in this Chargers wide receiver core. Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, big fan. Tyrell Williams was a top 15 wide receiver last year. You look at Matt Harmon, what he says, he grades how they run their routes and everything like this, reception perception. And Tyrell Williams was one of his top guys. This is an extremely talented wide receiver. I'm not talking about his athletic profile. I'm just talking about the way he plays football. And he's being drafted way, way too late. So I would say he's in my top 6. He wasn't a guy I was planning on mentioning, but the ADP on Tyrell Williams is fantastic. Tags, what do you think about Tyrell?
Yeah, he's someone that I want to move up my board. It's just hard to find the targets in San Diego, right? Or LA, I should say. Mike Williams potentially being out for an extended period of time, that helped, and I moved him up because of that. But, I'm not a huge Keenan Allen supporter, so I don't want anybody to get it twisted here. But Keenan Allen's still on the team, right? And he's a guy that's going to demand some targets. Hunter Henry is on the uptick. Antonio Gates has shown he's not going anywhere. They did sign last year Travis Benjamin. He's a guy that was brought in as a big profile free agent. He was one of the bigger signings last year at free agent. He was hurt a lot of last year. Don't forget about him. He's still going to find his way onto the field. The fact that they drafted Mike Williams tells you that they weren't really happy with their wide receiver core as is, which is really odd because I don't think anybody said that the Chargers needed another wide receiver. Even Dontrell Inman played pretty solid last year down the stretch. So for me, it's just tough finding the targets to move him up. But I have no issue with the talent and the fact the upside. Because if Keenan Allen were to get injured again, and this has happened like a lot, if that were to happen, then Tyrell Williams gets bumped up as a top 20 wide receiver. So again, I have no issue with that for sure. I think that, that risk is built into his ADP. So I actually like the call.
I'm going to go next. I don't know if you're planning on going, Tags, but I'm jumping ahead of you because I can't wait any longer to talk about Kevin White. I know we mentioned him on a lot of shows. I've been waiting like 2 weeks. I haven't mentioned him like 2 weeks, but this is the sleeper show. Like maybe this is someone's first time listening and they don't realize that Kevin White is one of the most athletic wide receivers in the NFL. Maybe they don't realize he was on pace for 170 targets while Alshon was there last year. I'm just, I'm extremely excited about his volume. I think he's safe. I think he's got incredible upside. Sure, he's got the injury risk. A lot of guys have injury risk. And you're getting this guy with about pick 140. Not me. I mean, I'm reaching 115 just to make sure someone like Jake Seeley doesn't reach up and grab him, which just happened. Jake Seeley picked him like 95 in our experts league. And I'm really mad at him. I'm going to be writing him a letter to let him know that that's not okay. But Kevin White is my guy.
Sean, go ahead. What do you think about it?
So, I want to apologize, Bobby. I know that you kept trying to trade for him in our Dynasty League, and I kept rejecting it.
Not cool, Sean. Not very happy about that either, man.
But so I would agree with you. I think it's easy to overlook him because he hasn't played yet, really. So, we have a first-round talent. He's on an awful team. They're going to have negative game scripts every week. I like him this late. You don't really need him to be a home run this late in the draft, but he has the talent and potential to be that. So I think he's worth the flyer this late in the draft.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, Sean. I forgot you drafted him in the expert league. I was worried when you started talking, you were just going to blast him and I was going to have to change my opinion because I mean, not to flatter you too much, but you tend to know everything. So if you didn't like Kevin White, maybe I should change my mind.
You'd be happy with me, Bobby. I'm actually writing an article right now that it's titled Last Pick Targets, and it's for like every size league. I go through every size league, and I tell you guys to target with your final picks, and Kevin White's on that list. In 10-team leagues, his ADP is right at 169, so therefore he's going in that 16th round, 17th round territory, which is the final pick. And why I don't love White, and I'll tell you why though. I think that there's upside there, but I think it requires something that I don't want to happen, and that's Mitch Trubisky would have to be quarterback. Because if you watch the Bears games, I don't really care the stat sheet. I watch the Bears games, and Mike Glennon's not good. He's not very good at football. That's the best way for me to describe it. His passes, his anticipation is not there. He is his decision making is extremely questionable. It's really bad. Like that's the best way to put it. So I don't think that there's going to be any wide receiver who's going to be consistent in this wide receiver core with him at the helm. With that being said, Mitch Trubisky was a guy that I liked. I don't want Mitch Trubisky to start in 2017, but with how bad Mike Glennon has played, if John Fox is going to plead for his job, he needs a quarterback who could throw the football, and Trubisky gives him the best chance to do that. I don't know if it happens, so there's risk tied to Kevin White, but I'll say this. It is not often that you can get a wide receiver past the 16th round who can get a minimum of 100 targets. And I think that 100 targets is the minimum for Kevin White because this is a Bears franchise who needs to find out if he is the wide receiver of their future. And I know some people are really, really high on Cameron Meredith, but I still think this is a Bears franchise that needs to find out what they have in Kevin White. So I definitely don't hate the pick at all because I put it in my own article I've stated my concerns.
You might as well not even give us a wide receiver sleeper tags, because I mean that was the end of the conversation. I mean you can say someone if you want, but I'm pretty sure everyone's just going to tune out.
No, what's funny though is I do want to go back to what Bobby said about the fact that it might be someone's first time listening to this show, and we haven't talked about some of these guys in a long time, and I want to talk about the guy that we're going to have on this exact show on Wednesday. I want to talk about John Brown. I know there's a lot of people out there panicking about everything that's going on with him. The quad injury, there's reports out there saying that the sickle cell trait is affecting how fast he's healing. These are questions I'm going to ask John Brown when he's on the show, and I can't wait to talk to him. He's an outstanding young man, and he's a guy that I believe is fantasy football's best kept wide receiver, like when healthy.
Incredible life story too, really cool.
It is. It's such a good story. But going back to 2015 when he was healthy, right? This is a guy, it was his second year in the NFL, and he was one of 3 wide receivers who finished as a top 24 wide receiver with fewer than 105 targets. It was him, it was Sammy Watkins, and it was Doug Baldwin. That's some pretty elite territory to be in. But going back and even looking at his stats last year, this is a guy who just needs targets to perform. Last year, when he wasn't even 100%, there were just 4 games in which he saw more than 4 targets. Like, think about that for a second. Just 4 games with more than 4 targets. In those games, he finished with 6 catches for 70 yards, 10 catches for 144 yards, 5 catches for 54 yards, and then 5 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. That's an average of 6.5 receptions, 87 yards, and then a touchdown every 4th game. You cannot find this production as the 45th wide receiver off the board. John Brown is uber talented. Is the health a concern? It absolutely is. And I want to talk to him about where he's at in his mental state, what he's feeling right now, because I'm sure it's not easy. He apparently suited up for the preseason game. He was in his uniform, and then, he went out in the practice field, then he walked back and he was sitting on the bench in his uniform, and it was a very sad point, I guess. But I'm really rooting for the kid. I can't wait to talk to him. And like I said, he is a guy that if I was guaranteed he was playing all 16 games, I am drafting him as a top 30 wide receiver.
Top 30? I'd move him even higher than that. I've got him pretty close to my top 30 as it is. I'm a big fan of John Brown too. The thing about John Brown is he's still young enough that he could be getting a lot better, right, Sean?
Yeah, so I mean, from a talent perspective and offense, I do like John Brown. I like him a lot, actually. If he can stay healthy, my sleeper pick is a little bit of a devil's advocate spin on that. So I'll hold off on saying too many good things about John Brown, but tell him I say hi next week.
Will do. All right, so you know what? Let's do it. Let's get into your wide receiver. Are we talking about John Brown? Is that where we're going?
No. JJ Nelson is my guy.
Nice. What do you got on him?
So I have him ranked a lot higher than his ADP, and I think he definitely has the upside if John Brown were to ever, miss extended time like he did last year. JJ Nelson last year from week 7 on, after John Brown was in and out of the lineup and they got rid of Michael Floyd, he actually was the number 15 wide receiver in all of fantasy football. So he's actually already proven that he can, handle being the number 2 guy in the offense. I just think he's a great fit. Defenses, they have to key in on Fitzgerald over the middle and David Johnson, and, JJ Nelson's always the forgotten guy that can score from anywhere on the field. So I think he's definitely worth a flyer late in the draft. You're not going to be relying on him every week, but he's a great backup to have, and he has the upside to be a wide receiver too. So I think he's the guy that I'm going to be targeting super late in drafts.
Yeah, I've snagged him in a few best ball leagues. I think JJ Nelson makes for a fantastic 19th, 20th round pick in a play draft and the best ball leagues you're doing.
I haven't thought about JJ Nelson at all. Sean, you're selling me here. I get a lot of crap on Twitter about, I say during the podcast maybe once a week. I think people overstate how much I do it. Maybe I do it more and just don't realize it. But I actually do move people up my rankings while we do these podcasts. And the reason we have all these great experts on is to talk about them, hear their opinion. Maybe they have an angle that we haven't thought about. Sean just shared something I haven't thought about. So yeah, I am going to move them up my rankings. I change my rankings every single day so that they can be as perfect as they can be going into the season.
So going forward, I'm going to throw out a hot take here. And I know it's going to be extremely hot takey, and I know that's not the show of this, but I want to throw out, this is a sleeper pick, right? And it's a guy that you can get literally for free. He's not being drafted in any league, but I want to talk about Tavon Austin.
Oh, no.
And no, hold on a second. Hold on. This is going to require some creativity on my part, so just bear with me.
Okay.
All right. So this is a guy who was a former number 1 dynasty pick. You know, he was the consensus, and I wasn't even the biggest Tavon guy. He wasn't a number 1 wide receiver. He was more of like that J.J. Nelson type wide receiver that can do some things in the running game, maybe even a Tyreek Hill-ish type player, right? So this is a guy who 2 years ago finished as a top 24 wide receiver. He only saw 87 targets that year, but he carried the ball 52 times. That was under some pretty bad coaching, right? So the reason I want to buy into Tavon Austin a little bit, we have Sean McVay coming to LA, right? He's the youngest coach of all time. Why is that significant? Well, because when you have guys like Jeff Fisher, you have dinosaurs. And what happens, you ever go to your grandparents' house and then you try and teach your grandparents something new, or you tell them they are afraid to go outside of their comfort zone. They don't change for anything. They don't want a damn cell phone. You know what I'm talking about, right? Sean McVay understands they have this guy under contract for the next 2 years, $22 million. He needs to find out a way to use him. Sean McVay is not afraid to change what he has to do in order to do that. When you have Todd Gurley, when you have Sammy Watkins, Cooper Kupp has looked solid as a possession receiver. Tavon Austin could be used as a gadget player, and he could be used extremely well. I think he's done well in that role before. I think he's been misguided in terms of what this Rams franchise has done, trying to target him double-digit times. I don't want that. If you get Tavon Austin 5 targets a game and 5 carries a game, he's going to be a flex player more often than he's not. And I just don't understand how people aren't looking into this just a little bit, because the guy, he is talented regardless of how you feel how he performed last year.
You make a compelling case. I mean, I'm still not exactly convinced, just because he was so bad last year. But then again, he did have Jeff Fisher as a coach, so I'm curious to hear what Sean's going to say here about Tavon Austin.
Yeah, so I kind of got burned recommending him quite a bit last year, so I'm definitely off the Tavon Austin train. But I think he does provide some sneaky floor. He has a decent floor just due to the fact that he usually gets a few carries a game. He gets 15 to 20 rushing yards a game, which is nice. I think he can actually benefit by having more playmakers around him. So, having Watkins there, Kupp, like you mentioned, can take some of the pressure off. I think he can actually be a little bit more of the gadget player that I think he can be. Having said that, though, if I look ahead to the Fantasy Football Championship, I do not want to have to rely on Tavon Austin in my starting lineup. So that's the thing. He can help you through the season, maybe get through some bye-week pinches, but when push comes to shove, I don't think he's going to end up on a championship-winning team that week. So just keep that in mind, that he's a guy that can give you some in-season, some fantasy regular season value, but I don't think it goes much farther than that because he's going to be pretty inconsistent.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well. I've got a whole list of guys for you. I'm not going to go into all of them. Zay Jones, obviously, I've been a big fan of him. Even after they traded Sammy Watkins and then got Jordan Matthews and he was hurt. I've been on such a roller coaster ride with Zay Jones, but I'm a big fan. I think he's the number 1 guy, big-time possession receiver. Another big-time possession receiver out of college this year, Cooper Kupp. I think he's the number 2 for the Rams. He's looked really good. All the analytics guys love Cooper Kupp. Devin Funchess, we've talked about him on the pod before. Double-digit touchdown upside. Kelvin Benjamin's not all that great. I know he's got, touchdown ability, but Devin Funchess, he's a player. He's been more efficient in his time than Kelvin Benjamin. Chris Conley, again, I've mentioned him before, super athlete like Kevin White. I know Alex Smith is the quarterback, which is not ideal, but he's got pretty significant upside as well. He's looked really good in the preseason in what we've seen. And then finally, Teddy Ginn Jr. I don't know if he actually does go by Teddy Ginn, but I've always called him Teddy Ginn. I don't know why, so we'll just stick with it. But he's going to be on the field for 75% of the snaps with Drew Brees, someone who throws for 4,900 yards every single season. Everyone's talking about Willie Snead, a good 60 picks earlier, but it's going to be Teddy Ginn who ends up getting a ton of targets. And he's got some big-time upside, too. He's been a top 25 receiver before. I think it happens again with Drew Brees this year.
I like the list, Bobby. I mean, there were some good names on there. I mean, Chris Conley, I don't think that there's a worse quarterback in the league to be thrown to Chris Conley, but if for some reason, Patrick Mahomes takes over, I think Chris Conley could turn into actually something. I think that he's more the prototypical number 1 wide receiver than Tyreek Hill is. Yeah. So, I mean, there could be something there, and he's being taken outside the top 80 wide receivers. The only other name I wanted to mention, and then we'll throw it to Sean just to give us his last couple names at wide receiver, is Josh Doxson. Some people want to anoint Terrell Pryor as the Calvin Johnson or this and that. Let's not forget that last year Josh Doxson was considered to be the number one wide receiver off the board in drafts, and it was like kind of like a no-brainer, right? He's a guy that's phenomenal in the red zone. He's played wide receiver his entire life. He's 6'4". His head coach compared him to A.J. Green when they drafted him. Terrell Pryor is a guy, I mean, I'm not saying that Terrell Pryor is not going to do anything. I have Terrell Pryor ranked higher, but it really would not shock me if Josh Doxson turns out to be the wide receiver that everybody thinks Terrell Pryor is going to be this year. It wouldn't shock me at all. I just think that the ceiling is there for the number one wide receiver that they were supposed to be drafting. And don't forget, they also signed Terrell Pryor to just a 1-year deal. So I think they're counting on Josh Doxson more than some people think. Sean, who do you got for your last couple of receivers?
Yeah, so you guys basically took a few that I would definitely target this late too, but the only one that I don't think you guys mentioned that, I'm getting a lot late is Robbie Anderson. He's a guy that we kind of saw this where his stock skyrocketed the past couple of months and he hasn't really done anything. With Decker being traded away and then Enunwa's unfortunate season-ending injury, he's now the guy there. And, they're going to be a dumpster fire 0-16 team trying to get the first pick. So they're going to have plenty of negative game scripts. They're going to be, just basically just throwing it around the second half a lot this year. And we've seen that he can take advantage of that. So I think he's overlooked late in the draft. Yeah, he's not the best receiver ever, and he's not on a great team, but I think those kind of play in his favor. He's just going to be targeted each and every week. So I think he provides a insane value as a wide receiver 5 or 6. I love him where he's going right now.
I actually look at Cameron Meredith and Robbie Anderson, and I'm not really sure which one's the better football player, but I can tell you Robbie Anderson is going to get more opportunities.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I agree with that. Now, Anderson is another one. I think he's like that Kevin White-ish where I talked about with yours, Bobby, saying that it's rare to find a receiver this late who's going to see that 100-plus targets. Robbie Anderson, he's not going to finish as a top 20 wide receiver or anything. I don't think he has that ceiling in that offense, but like Sean said, we're talking about a guy that you're getting for free, and that many targets you can't buy, so I definitely love the pick. And he was on my list further down along with Paul Richardson, who I don't want to spend time talking about. We have to touch tight ends real quick, but Paul Richardson, keep an eye on that name. Seriously, he could blow up.
Yeah, I've come around on Paul Richardson. Okay, let's go on to tight ends. We'll let Sean go first again here.
Okay, so my first tight end is Kobe Fleener, who definitely was a massive bust last year, but, same situation. He gets to play for Drew Brees. Another year in the offense. He's going to have another offseason working with him. Hopefully he can work out some chemistry. But, I'm drafting Kobe Fleener as a backup tight end for someone like Jordan Reed, who I still like targeting Jordan Reed early in drafts, but, he has that huge injury risk downside. So I think Kobe Fleener is a guy that could kind of help curb that downside. He's also a guy that you can play matchups where you just play him at home. But he's a guy that's going a little too late for, the amount of upside he has in that offense.
I am completely with you on Kobe Fleener. In fact, you took my guy again, which makes me really, really happy. Sean, I'm so glad that we're in agreement on all these players.
Yes, likewise.
It makes a more entertaining show when we can disagree with one another. But I'm more worried about entertaining myself that I'm right here. So, this is really good. I'm excited about this show. Tags, who's your guy, man?
Oh, my God. I mean, I could talk about a few guys. Austin Hooper seems like a no-brainer, but the one I'm going to throw out there, I do like Austin Hooper, but the one I'm going to throw out there even further down the list, and I want to just make a point on, is Vance McDonald. We've heard a lot of reports out of San Francisco this offseason that have been complete garbage. I don't think anybody has a pulse on San Francisco and what John Lynch and what Kyle Shanahan want to do. We heard that Carlos Hyde was going to get cut. We heard all that stuff. We heard that Joe Williams was the man. Joe Williams is now third on the depth chart. Matt Breida, an undrafted free agent, was starting over him. So, take what you hear with a grain of salt, including the fact that Vance McDonald was a guy that they said that they were going to cut, right? Looking over the last 2 years in San Francisco, Torrey Smith and Vance McDonald, they combined for 14 touchdowns on 202 targets. The remaining wide receivers and tight ends there accounted for 17 touchdowns, 3 more, on 627 targets. So, you're like, let's take our most productive player, at the tight end position, like by far, and just throw him away. Let's just do that, right? No, you're not going to rely on a rookie tight end, George Kittle, to come in there and steal that job. I think Vance McDonald's an interesting name. I'm not saying that you need to draft him, but with all these people talking about San Francisco and, Pierre Garçon's guaranteed to see 120 targets because the targets have to go somewhere, I think you can make the case that Vance McDonald may be where some of those targets are going to go, and targets are everything to the tight end position. So if week 1 comes and you see Vance McDonald get 5 or 6 targets, snag him off the waiver wire, because it can happen. He's that good of an athlete. I don't need to make a point on it.
He's
more
a playmaker
with stats, but for sure.
Sean, what do you think about Vance McDonald? Any interest whatsoever?
No interest whatsoever, but I agree with the talking points. I think I know they were considering cutting him and, all these things, but he's right. This is an offense where we don't really know where all the targets are going to go to, so it's pretty wide open. He could definitely be a sneaky, low-end tight end 1. We don't know. I'm just basically removing myself from trying to figure out the San Francisco 49er tight end situation. So I'm passing, but, I don't think it's that crazy.
Okay, I was going to talk about Austin Hooper, but since Tag said he's obvious, I'm just going to pass on that. If you want to go back and listen about Austin Hooper, we talked about him on the Christopher Harris show. This is what it comes down for me. We've got Vance McDonald, Charles Clay, Austin Seferian-Jenkins. One of these guys is going to turn out, maybe 2 of them. They've all got high upside because they're all going to get substantial targets, in my opinion. The Jets have nobody. Quincy Enunwa was basically a nobody, and he's gone now. Vance McDonald might be the best receiver outside of Pierre Garçon in San Francisco. They're going to be playing from behind a lot. Sammy Watkins is gone. Anquan Bolden's gone. Charles Clay was getting a lot of targets at the end of the season. What it comes down to is draft Rob Gronkowski in the 2nd round. If he gets hurt, you pick up one of these guys and you're fine. There is never depth at tight end. This year there's depth. You can pick up a guy off the waiver wire that I think is going to be all right, and you might just have the best tight end in the history of football on your side. I think he has the 1st and 2nd tier all to himself. I've got Rob Gronkowski all the way up at number 14 on my big board, and right now his ADP is number 22, so I'm getting him at the end of 2nd rounds. There's no doubt about it, and I think it's definitely worth the risk, especially considering what you've got to fall back on this year.
For sure. And I think that the last player I wanted to mention is I don't want to talk about him because we all know who Antonio Gates is, but this is why is he considered a sleeper? I mean, he's drafted outside the top 20 tight ends. I don't get it. He's still going to play, guys. He didn't come back to sit on the bench. He's being underdrafted.
Yeah, he probably will get 20 red zone, not 20. He'll probably get 15 red zone targets again. It's just what they do with him, and he's chasing that record. So I don't know, but Hunter Henry is there, and they've got to get him on the field if they want to make the playoffs.
Anybody else you wanted to mention, Sean, before we get out of here?
No, just a really, really deep sleeper would be Jesse James. I know he's been working with Big Ben in the offseason. He could be his go-to red zone guy, like his Heath Miller safety valve. So I think he's a guy to monitor on the waiver wire. I wouldn't go out of my way to draft him too early, but he's definitely a sneaky, backup tight end. But I agree, just try to get Gronkowski in the 2nd round, and then you don't have to worry about too much of this. But I think Jesse James is a guy that can surprise us here.
Sean, this was awesome. Good luck on the 3-peat. I'm rooting for you. It's just fun to see someone be this dominant in something this hard and volatile. It's really impressive, and we appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And starting next week is when I shift over from my season-long focus to the weekly projection. So
sweet.
Definitely getting amped for it.
You guys can find Sean on stats.com. He puts out incredible stuff every single week, and he really is the top dog in the industry. He's the guy we're all trying to take down. So I'm thrilled we got to have him come on this sleeper show and talk to him. We've got a few more shows coming up later this week. As Tags mentioned, John Brown of the Arizona Cardinals is coming on. Then Jim Sanis of numberfire.com to talk about overvalued and undervalued players. Remember to submit your entries for the Listener League and signed Odell Beckham jersey from pristineauction.com. Thanks again to the sponsors of today's show, Flea Flicker and playdraft.com/fantasypros. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.